people don't talk about poop in the United States like they do in other cultures. We're just trying to help make those conversations, A, more accessible, and then B, arm you with objective data to go have conversations with your healthcare providers and to be able to show you when something is not normal. Because a lot of people, if they're not talking about this with others, they don't know what normal looks like. We hadn't ever taken it seriously until I called my mom and I was like, again, geriatrician, like old people primary care physician. I was like, Mom, is there any medical utility to looking at people's waste? And her answer was, honey, like, yes. In fact, I've stopped giving my phone number to my patients because they send me so many pictures of their poop. Like, that's a crazy answer. Computer vision is so good at image analysis now. And like, you run an x-ray through an AI, it's going to catch things that a radiologist might miss. And so if we could take that same principle and turn it into the toilet bowl and train an AI on, not just poop, but also like urine and menstrual blood and like every human emission that goes into the toilet bowl. That was an incredibly interesting opportunity to Tim and I. That's what brought us to what we're doing now.
My immediate thought process was, if I had had this in college, I would have never gotten ulcerative colitis. We need to be talking about these things. And throughout history, we have talked about this, and we've just chosen to kind of brush it under the rug to our detriment. Because like you said, the gut health is so important. And it almost seems like our modern understanding at scale is like, we understand the gut equivalent to the way that we might understand space. Like, there's so much more to learn and so much that we don't understand that we should. Scott, thanks for being here, brother.
Brett, thanks for having me.
I've never, this is actually probably like our first sit down conversation, because every time we meet up, we're just going on 5-mile walks together.
I don't think we've ever sat down to talk.
No, actually, this is the first time, which I love.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, this is fantastic.
Man, dude, I'm so pumped for this episode for a number of reasons. I'm really pumped to dig into all the work that you and the team are doing at Throne, but I always love to give our audience a little bit of context into how we meet. And we have a great story, because months before I ever met you, I, no joke, probably had like 3 to 5 different people that told me about you and the work you guys are doing at Throne, because they knew that I had ulcerative colitis and the Meat Mafia podcast, and they saw the connection. And so you were on my radar. And I think was it Bill Murphy's was it a wellness day event that we actually met at for the first time?
It was at Sapien Center.
Center.
It was for the Bitcoin halving conversation.
Yes. So it's so funny. We were talking about, before we recorded, the serendipity of events, the things that you say yes to, and connecting the dots backwards, how it almost always works out. And I think I was almost going to not go to that. And then the day before, they offered us the ability to just sample some Noble smoothies there. Said yes to it, and then that's how you and I met.
I had no idea that was your path to that event. Mine was a buddy of mine who's very plugged into the crypto community was speaking at that event, and I went just to support him. I'm not particularly a crypto guy, and I felt out of my element there too. But turns out there was a lot of cool, interesting health and wellness people there, and made this friendship out of it.
Oh man, I mean, that's just the value of being in Austin, right? We've talked about that at length before. So you're a Lubbock guy originally, and then born and raised in Lubbock, went to school in UT.
Correct.
And then what was your path from there that led you? You didn't stay in Austin the entire time,
I stayed
right?
in Austin the entire time. I've been here like almost 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So 18 in Lubbock, came here for school, stuck around ever since. Like, I've tried to leave a couple times, but every time something reached out and sucked me back in. And now I've given up the idea of leaving Austin, because like, where else would I be right now?
I know, because especially for you, it's a blend of everything you want, right?
It's the most perfect place. There's, ambitious, young, high energy tech talent. And then there's like, I would consider it like the capital of the alt health movement, right? Like, so many of the people leading companies that are incredibly relevant and adjacent to me live here, and they're my friends, and they're 10, 20, 100 steps down the path, so to speak, from where I am today, and they're all shining their flashlights behind me, illuminating paths, showing me where the potholes are.
Yes. Yeah, what's funny about that too is, like, I always think about Austin and the geography and the fact that the city truly is an oasis, but there's nothing really about Austin itself that makes it an oasis. Like, there's beautiful parts to the city, warm weather a lot of the year, but there's no beach, there's no mountains, but it's the people, man.
100%. It's, to your point, there's no beach, no mountains. Like, it's just the perennial bummer for me. Like, my favorite activities all involve beaches and mountains, but like, Austin's halfway to everywhere, and it's just the community here is second to none.
Yes. So what was it like growing up in Lubbock, did you know that you wanted to get out of there and eventually be in a bigger city? Like, what was that experience like?
So, I mean, Lubbock is like country, and I am not. I've never owned boots, never owned a cowboy hat. And so I knew like from a very young age, like this was not my forever home, right? There's like a joking phrase back home, right? Like Lubbock or leave it. And like, I left it.
Yeah.
And now my entire family's left. It was, without getting too much into it, but like basically ended up there because my parents split up when I was very young and ended up with a geographic restriction. My mom's from Canada, and there was a conversation like, well, in the split, like, were we going to go back to Canada? And, as young, like I was 3 and my brother was 1, was that going to be a thing? And so I was like, no, they both committed to staying in Lubbock until my younger brother was 18 years old, which is how we ended up staying there my entire childhood. And it was a great childhood, honestly, right? Like I was a nerd. Like there's a lot of late blooming that happened in my life just because it was a fairly insulated space. I didn't have my first drink until my 21st birthday.
Nice.
Well, not nice. I just say that because, like, if you're not out drinking and getting in trouble in Lubbock, like, you're just pretty much, cloistered up in your basement, playing a lot of guitar like I did, or playing a bunch of video games with your friends. It was like a, quaint suburban upbringing.
Yeah. And I'm imagining you were a good student too, because you're an engineering guy first. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was a mechanical engineer at UT. I was an okay student in high school. I was a really good student in college. And if I had to say I have one regret in life, it's that I was like probably too good a student in college. And looking back, no one's ever asked me about my GPA once.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Yes. So what changed when you got to college versus growing up?
So I think the formative experience for me was I failed my first calculus test. I went to UT in the business school. I knew, like, my dad's an entrepreneur. I knew growing up I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I started at UT in the business school, took my first calculus class my first semester of freshman year, and failed that test, the first test, miserably. And I went to my professor and asked her, brought her the test. I was like, hey, what can I do to make sure this doesn't happen again? And she looks down at my score and she looks up at me and she goes, I suggest you find a degree that doesn't require math. I just like walked out of there with my tail between my legs, totally sunken hearted, and dropped her class, and then spent the next, the remainder of that semester and the following semester just kind of like sulking, right? Like that was like my first like real, existential crisis I've ever had. Like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, shit, if I can't do math, like, am I going to do this degree plan? And I decided, the one thing I did too that was really helpful is I went to every like guest speaker that came through the business school that year, and like, the after hours guest lectures that come around like 5 or 6, and I would walk them all to their car after their lecture and ask them like, hey, if you were 18 years old doing it all over again, but knowing what you know now, like, what would you do different? I was like, managing directors, CEOs, entrepreneurs, founders, and a lot of them were like, go get a technical degree, right? Like, you can learn business in the real world. And one guy said it to me really well. He was like, look, go become an engineer. Like, an engineer can wake up tomorrow and start a business. A business person will not wake up tomorrow with the knowledge and skills of an engineer. I was like, okay. And so I transferred into geosystems engineering and hydromechanics, which was the only way I could get into the engineering school, because it was technically a degree program hosted by the geology school, jointly with the engineering school. And it was the smallest program in the smallest college at Texas University. And I snuck my way in. I got into the engineering program through that, and basically just committed the next 4 years. I was on the 5-year plan at that point, but I committed the next 4 years to learning math, because I realized like I did not want to go through life convinced that I was the kid that couldn't do math, because then I'd be going through life with like, these beliefs about like who I was that were inherently restrictive. And so now I still can't do math, but I could at one point, and that's what matters.
Yes. And you can hire the people that can do the math for you, so you don't have to worry about that.
Totally. And it turns out the math that I failed, like, I don't know that we've done any calculus at Throne, right? Like, I take it back. There's actually some differential equations that we plan to be doing. But yeah, for the most part, like, there's shockingly little math done outside of spreadsheets in the real world.
Yeah. It even, as you're speaking, it even makes me wonder, I think about this question a lot, thinking about like the next chapter of life and getting married and having kids. I even wonder, will our kids, will they even need to go to school? And I've heard you say this before, that so much of what you've learned as a founder and through this whole path of entrepreneurship, you can only learn it by like actually getting your hands dirty and putting them in the soil and making those mistakes. And, you know, you went to UT, incredible school. I went to Babson, you know, tried and true entrepreneurship program. And still like 99% of the kids that I graduated with just took, you know, standard banking, consulting, sales jobs. And, you know, we had incredible professors, and actually some of the relationships with the professors are still my biggest connection point to that school, which is really cool. But outside of that, like everything that we're doing now is literally just figuring out in the real world.
Totally. You just have to be willing to fail and have a peace with sucking at something long enough to get good at it.
Yes. A peace with sucking until you long enough until you get good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
And like, I suck at a lot of things.
Yeah.
But if I enjoy the process of doing it, and like, you know, falling and getting hurt actually doesn't hurt that bad if you just accept it as part of the process, right? Like, if you played, you know, any sports as a kid, you know, like the learning curve of a sport involves often a lot of falling and pain. I did gymnastics growing up, and like, you know, learning new skills. I mean, you fall for the first 200 times you try a new thing.
Definitely. Yeah. I always think about, I love the Founders Podcast episode on this guy. I think his name is Izzy Sharp, who's the founder of the Four Seasons. And his quote that's ringing in my ears right now is, oftentimes entrepreneurship is just your capacity to take pain.
Yes.
And that's true. And then the nuance of it, like you said, whereas yes, it's taking pain, but doing it with a smile on your face and trying to enjoy the ride as much as possible too.
100%.
Right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So much of it is just like a mental battle and a head game and everything like that.
Yeah, and then it's a great joy to get to do these things, you know, like sports. You know, my favorite sports are skiing, mountain biking, kiteboarding, you know, hiking. Like, but those first three, skiing, mountain biking, and kiteboarding, I've hurt myself badly doing all three of those things. Right, I've dislocated my shoulder skiing, I dislocated my shoulder mountain biking, and then I've like gotten dragged across reefs kiteboarding and like, you know, scraped up and bloody, and like, what a joy to get to be out there in the world doing these crazy activities involving, you know, momentum. Like, I think about this all the time. Like, you know, our ancestors, like even like 4 generations ago, could never have experienced these things. Like surfing was the closest they had. And like, but just these momentum sports where your body's moving through this world at like, you know, high speeds, like it's exhilarating and comes with risk. And like, you just accept that.
Yes.
And like, that's a great metaphor for entrepreneurship.
It really is, man. It's interesting too how even though you're only 18 years old as a freshman, you had the foresight to still go to all these lectures and seminars and talks and actually like seek those people out and build relationships. Do you still have any connections with any of the people that you met there? I know this might be a tough question to answer.
That's a great question. The honest answer is no. There's one professor. So I failed that first calculus class, you know, set me on this self-discovery path. The second calculus class I took, you know, a year later was this with a professor named Yuri Treisman, who was just a tremendously, you know, inspirational and wise man. And I still keep up with him, you know, every year or so I'll touch base with him. But other than that, it was just the lessons that were worthwhile, not necessarily the connections at that point in my life.
Yes. With Yuri, was he inspirational because you got the sense that he really believed in you even at a young age?
He really believed in everyone. He believed in humans' capacity. He was just a great humanist. And he would stop his lectures on, you know, derivatives and integral calculus to teach life lessons that just randomly would pop into his head. And it was just, you know, I kept 2 separate notebooks when I was in his class, one for math and one for just wisdom.
Wow. That
he would say. And it was great. And he just had such an inspiring story and would, you know, look everybody in the eyes. And so we made a deal that was if I made an A in his class, I was really into music at the time. If I made an A in his class, then he and I would have a jam session together because he played guitar. And I made the A, and then he pulled me aside after the semester was over and was like, hey man, I would love to make good on this, but like my Parkinson's is advanced to the point where like I don't think I can play guitar anymore. But you know, congrats on the A.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that he even like had the foresight to go to you and tell you that and everything like that.
Just honor, just a super high integrity dude. But like at the end of the day, I wouldn't, you know, busting my ass. I mean, literally, I was like a 30, 40 hour week endeavor to make an A in that class. Like I was not good at math, but I really wanted it. Unless because I really cared about that jam session, more because I wanted to make him proud. Like he's the type of person that you're just like, shit, like I don't want to let this guy down.
Yes. I mean, that Yuri story is so great for a number of reasons, particularly you think about the weight that you have as a professor or a teacher and the amount of students you're able to impact. And just, especially as a young man, if one person showcases that belief in you, like we're just craving that so much, right?
100%.
Yeah. And then we realize too, hey, you don't have to actually be a professor. Like when you're thrown or in your day-to-day life or what I'm doing as well, you can actually just choose to showcase that, like just inject that energy and optimism into people. And I feel like you're the perfect example of that.
Well, I appreciate that. It means a lot. There's someone I met with a couple of years ago, a guy named Eric Schneider, who was serial founder, and he told me very early on, he's a hardware guy. So at the very beginning of Throne, when we were even exploring, like, hey, is this a thing we're going to go do? We made it a point to meet with as many hardware people as we could. And I interviewed to work with Eric back like when I was still in school, like as a possible summer internship, and ended up going somewhere else, but still had kept in touch with him on LinkedIn. So I reached back out, and he was super generous with his time. We had several meetings in those early days of Throne, just getting our bearings around how to build a new hardware devices, not hardware people. And he mentioned offhand in one of those meetings, he was like, I try and spend like 10 to 15% of my week just helping other founders.
15, 20%?
10 to 15%. But still,
that's a lot, man.
That's a crazy percentage. But also, like, I think about that at least once a month.
Wow.
I mean, and I most mornings now, my first meeting in the morning, I try and make it a coffee walk where I go meet other founders who are fundraising or just want to, they're passing through town and want to chat. But like, because the other thing is, it's just the energy of talking with people who are in the arena, right?
Yes.
It's just so fun.
Yes. And I love the model that you have of like doing walks outside with people. That's something that I actually picked up from you, and I've been implementing it a lot more, where like, number one, your personality is inspiring. We feed off of each other's energy. But I just remember that first coffee, like we just took a couple long loops around the east side, had some coffee, sun, talked, really felt like I got to know you, versus just like being kind of confined at a table at a coffee shop or over dinner too. And so it's like, we're getting steps, we're meeting, we're figuring out ways that we can help each other. And then a couple months later, it all came full circle. But that is an interesting point. Like the 10 to 15% is a lot. And these people, other people need help. We need help. And then on a weird selfish way, you always feel better when you talk to people and you just try and add value without the expectation of receiving something in return.
Absolutely. Right. Like the walk I was on this morning was with a new friend, new to Austin, who's fundraising for his startup right now. And, fingers crossed, he's signing term sheets today. We're super excited for him.
That's
and
awesome.
I made a few introductions for him, and I don't know, I know for a fact actually that the ones he's signing with are not the folks I made the introductions to, but like he was just incredibly grateful for those intros. And at the end, he's like, man, how can I help you? I'm like, dude, just like keep me posted on the journey, right? Like, let's do this again next month.
Definitely.
Like now that you have the money, like, what are you going to do with it? I want to follow that part too.
Yes. No, that's so just like giving without expectation, because, that's happened in your life. It's happened in my life, and that stuff just pays itself forward. And something I've been more mindful of too is just follow-ups to the people that help me, like him with you, and just I made a list the other day of like, who are all the people that come to mind over the last couple of years that have like added value to me. I'm like, well, am I doing a good enough job keeping them up to speed? I don't know. It's just been a concept that I've been thinking about.
Do you
more.
write like a quarterly update for like investors and friends?
To be honest with you, I haven't, and it's something that's been sitting in my crawl in like the back of my mind.
Dude, so do it for them too. But the other part that's just like selfishly so fun for me. So I write this quarterly update that's, nominally an investor update, but investors are probably a third of the people that actually receive it, right? It's also all of the friends and folks that I've, had a couple coffees with along the way who are like invested in the journey.
Yes.
And it's just a great way to, keep those loose ties engaged. I have a great friend who says, the best friends you have are your best friends. The next best friends are not your medium best friends. It's the loose ties that you keep in touch with, once, twice, 3 times a year over the course of years. And then, you run into each other randomly at an airport and have a great 4-hour conversation.
Definitely.
I'm like, man, I love that. And so a great way to do that is these quarterly investor updates, because like, it's a nice thing. But then selfishly, the most fun for me is getting to go back and see where we were a year, 18 months ago, and be like, oh my gosh, like it feels like you make this much progress every week, but then compounded over the course of, a year, it's like, holy shit, that's what our app looked like a year ago. Like we're flying.
Yes. Like even you graciously gave me one of the early prototypes of Throne, and you just showing me like the new design that you guys will launch with, just seeing that progression over time and then what the product is going to turn into.
Totally. Screenshots. Like,
yes.
Screenshots, videos, like, I write all my investor updates in Notion so that I can embed stuff in them. So it's a much more engaging letter. But then I can go back and it's a nice little like time capsule of the journey.
Yes. So what do? You kind of just have like a Rolodex of all the people that you want to keep in the loop, and then you have a certain format for that letter. I'm imagining like business, personal, kind of check all those boxes.
I don't even check personal. It's just business, and like I probably should add some more personal into it, but for the most part, the format is just like recap. Like, here's what Throne is, right? Like, because again, I don't expect that people are. I live, eat, and breathe my company, but I can't expect that of other people. So here's Throne. We're a company building a monitoring device for gut health and urological function and hydration. And then I go through, key metrics, just like 4 or 5 bullets. Here's how many people are on the team. Here's how much cash we have on the bank. Here's what our runway is. And then it's, I start with the problems, right? Because like these are the things that are top of mind for us. So they belong at the top of my update to you. And just want to get those out of the way. And then we move on to the fun stuff, right? Yes. Which is like, here's the wins we've had in the last few months, both on the product and engineering front and then on the business front. And then I close with like thank yous and asks.
I love that. You actually just gave me that helped remove the friction for me, because I think I was probably just putting too much pressure on myself for Noble, where I'm like, how in the weeds do we get? And it seems like this very basic flow works, and it doesn't have to just be to investors.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you. I'll actually send you the one I'm writing right now for the end of March.
Yes,
but like it's all formatted. It's just bullets. Now I'm going through and like fleshing it out with like narrative. But like, yeah, just. Don't think too much about it. People are invested in you. Yes. They want to follow your journey.
I mean, you've probably gotten some amazing serendipity that was unintended just from having that list and sending those reports out, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Like, folks ask to invest, folks, reach out. They're like, oh my God, like, can I introduce you to like my gastroenterologist? Like, can I forward this to someone? Like, by all means, please do.
Yes. All right. I'm going to send one out end of March. And I'm going to use your template, and I'm going to send it to you before I do it. That's a little accountability on the pod.
Holding you to it. Look forward.
That's the best part about recording something and putting it on the record, is then you have to live up to what you say. I
love that.
Yes. So I'm very, very excited to dig into Throne and tell our audience about what it is. And right before we do that, I just want to bridge the gap from how you went from an engineering background to this entrepreneurial path.
All right. So my first job out of school was at a small startup here in town in the GovTech space. That was a like classic, if you're not growing, you're dying type situation. I did not know that going into it. I was there for 6 months, long enough to realize like, oh, this is not a long-term thing. The most important kind of learning I had there was that there was this, nebulous field called product management. And, that's probably what I should be doing, because it seemed to me like product management is actually very similar to like what a mechanical engineer's role was. As a mechanical engineer, you're doing a lot of the design work, but the actual implementation work is often left to like technicians in the field, right? Same thing with product management, where you're doing a lot of the product design work. You're sourcing all the requirements from the business. You're working with designers to like make the screens. You're in, set the product requirements for like, how users are supposed to interact with it. And then you're working with the engineers to get it built, but you're not the one writing the code. You're not the one like, making the pixels look right. You're more, corralling a group of people to build something.
Yes.
And that is just a perfect fit for my personality, right?
It really is.
It really is. Like, and you're not anyone's manager. You have no authority over these people. It's just persuasion and like, hey, like, here's what I think we should be doing. Here's all my reasoning why. Let's go do it. And they either like agree with you or they don't. And, to be an effective product manager, you have to be pretty compelling. And at any rate, like, I had some friends that were doing this, and I was like, man, I got to go do that. And so I got hired as a product manager at Keller Williams, which is a big residential real estate company headquartered here in Austin, and got lucky to cut my teeth there right as they were building basically their entire like tech suite in-house. They were previously, licensing from 15 different vendors and paying, tens of millions of dollars a year in software licensing fees. And they just looked at that and they're like, well, if we dedicate $5 million a year to building out a team and building this all out in-house ourselves, then we are masters of our own destiny from a software perspective. And we'll actually have software that, is interoperable with each other and, does what we explicitly want it to do instead of like begging our vendors, hey, can you please like submit this feature change for us? So I was hired at KW, and like it's not a sexy company, right? Like it's a residential real estate broker from like the 80s that in hindsight was just like the most perfect place to learn product management, because I got to launch like 14 products in 12 months.
Wow.
To a user base of like 20,000 users from the moment we turned that product on. And then there's hundreds of thousands of real estate agents at KW, but there's 20,000 that were just like super engaged in that new product development process. And like, you don't get that at a startup. That was such a privilege. So I just got a ton of reps in super quick. And then I got poached to go over to another friend's company called Esper, which is a different GovTech company. So at that point I had product management experience and I had some GovTech experience. And I knew how not to build GovTech. And so I joined them as their first product manager, was there with them for about a year, and then left to go start my own company. And all of this was ultimately in the service of getting to a point where I could start my own company, right? Like, and product manager is generally regarded as like a fast track to being a founder, because again, the same persuasive skills and, organizing people around a concept to build things is fundamentally the job of a founder. And so I went off to go start my own company called Carbon Zero, which is a credit card to measure and offset your carbon footprint. In hindsight, that was a terrible idea. People really like their credit card points and don't want to give up their rewards. And the idea for that company was, instead of traditional rewards like points, miles, or cash back, we would use that interchange to fund carbon offsets on your behalf.
Okay. And
for a lot of reasons, that ended up not working out. But I was able to soft land that company, sold that. All my investors made like 20%, which is, better than losing their money. And I was able to pay myself back the salary that I hadn't made for the year and a half I was working on that company. And then from there, I went to a different startup, Royal, which was a crypto music company selling music royalties on the blockchain. Again, like strong theoretical underpinnings, just like, when the rubber hit the road, I think it turns out like music royalties are just fundamentally not a consumer investable asset class. They look a lot like bonds, which are like, again, not like a retail investment instrument. So left Royal. And by the way, I got recruited to Royal by JD Ross and Justin Blau, the founders, and their pitch to me was, come join Royal and we'll be your first investors when you go start your next company. Which
was
a very
like compelling pitch.
Impossible to say no to, right?
And
like
they were, right?
They were.
Yeah.
To their infinite credit, they made good on that, right? And they're just like, I love so much. To your point about accountability, right? Like when you call your shot on the podcast and then you have to make good on that because all your listeners are going to hold you accountable to it. Like, I love so much when someone calls their shot and then sinks it, 8-ball corner pocket, right? Like, they did not, like, yes, they had to do that because they told me they would, but like, if they didn't, no one would ever have found out, right? But like, they did, and like, it still means the world to me. Like, JD, Justin, if you're listening to this, like, thank you. And so that was an amazing chapter of my career too, because I was like licking my wounds from like, no one starts a startup hoping for like a base hit, right? And so like, that was like, just a lot to process there. Selling a company is always an exhausting, in particular in my situation, was like, we won't go into it here, but like, I had a lot of learnings to take away from that and processing that. And so that was a very explicit stepping stone in my career, right? Like, I knew Royal was not going to be the long-term thing, and I knew it was a stepping stone into the next thing, but then I kind of had the license to search for like, what is that next thing while working on my current thing, which is like a gift that they gave me, right? Like, I didn't have to hide that from my managers. And so I recruited my now co-founder, Tim, and this is where we're starting to get into Throne. So Tim moved to Austin in 2021 from SF as part of the, COVID diaspora. One of my best friends from college introduced us, was like, Scott, give Tim a soft landing. So I brought Tim into our poker game, which is kind of our little COVID bubble activity, right? Like 10 guys sitting around a poker table every week. And literally it was the first time we ever sat down at the poker table together. Someone pitched the question, right? Like, what are some startup ideas you'd love to start but wouldn't want your name associated with? Which is like a great question.
It's an incredible question.
I forget who posed it, but I'll have to go back and ask. but everyone else is, pitching sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like vice industry stuff, right? Like the stuff you wouldn't want your name associated with. And Tim's like, smart toilets. Like, I want to make a toilet that like weighs how much my dump is. Like, he's like, I've been talking about this with my buddies since college. Like, I think this is inevitable. Like, it's crazy to me that this doesn't exist. And I was like, that's hilarious. Like, clearly you would name that company Throne and put a leaderboard on it. And your go-to-market is you sell it into frat houses and poker rooms like this. Because like all the guys at the table thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then that became like a running joke amongst me and Tim for a couple of years. I recruited him to Royal, actually. So we treated that as like the dating before marriage as co-founders. And then we left Royal originally to start a healthcare staffing marketplace similar to like Uber for nurses. So we both come from healthcare families. Both my parents are physicians. My mom's a geriatrician. My dad's a medical device inventor and a cardiac anesthesiologist. Tim's mom is a nurse. His three sisters are nurses, or three of his sisters, I should say. And at that time, we were aware of like how the acute nurse shortage through COVID. And we were like, let's go. And like his sisters were all on these, nurse staffing platforms, and they hated them. They were, they felt like we were really not being treated well. We're like, well, if we just go build a platform that treats, the staff with dignity and respect, clearly that would be the winner. Again, wrong for a lot of reasons. Don't need to go into that here. But basically, we realized within, 6 weeks of fundraising for that business that it was not going to work. We're like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. At that point, one of our friends was like, hey, have you guys ever thought about smart toilets? We're like, dude, that's Throne.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we've thought about smart toilets, but no, we haven't actually thought about this seriously, right?
You got
like
the leaderboard picked out already.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, and like we have texts going back to like 2022, like joking about Throne, but we hadn't ever taken it seriously until I called my mom, and I was like, again, geriatrician, like old people primary care physician. I was like, Mom, is there any medical utility to looking at people's waste? And her answer was, honey, like, yes. In fact, I've stopped giving my phone number to my patients because they send me so many pictures of their poop. Right. Like, that's a crazy answer. And like,
it is. When
you actually unpack it, there's a lot of like learnings in that, right? Like, number one, like, this is a big enough problem that more than one patient is doing this to my mom. And like my mom, the other thing is like my mom lives in Ruidoso, New Mexico now, right? Like that is like, so far away from the Austin bubble of people that care about like gut health and are proactive about their health, right? Like this is not the wellness warriors. These are just everyday Americans in the middle of the country. And so that's really interesting to me. The other part that was interesting is that my mom's not a poop expert, right? She gets these pictures. She's like, schedule time to come to my office, but like, Definitely. Don't show me your poop. Like, this is not helpful to me.
Yeah.
But her patients are also clearly looking for health insights, right? They intuit that there's health insights in their poop. That's why they're sending it to their doctor.
Yes.
But my mom's not a gastroenterologist. She doesn't know. She wants them to come in for a checkup. And so the other conversation that Tim and I had around that time was just, we had this awareness that there's a conversation around radiology being one of the first medical professions to be, if not automated, then at least, incredibly augmented with AI, because computer vision is so good at image analysis now, right? And like you run an X-ray through an AI, it's going to catch things that a radiologist might miss, and there's no human error. And you can just train it on these massive data sets and pick up like very small, minute details. And so if we could take that same principle and turn it into the toilet bowl and train an AI on, not just poop, but also like urine and menstrual blood and like every human emission that goes into the toilet bowl, that was an incredibly interesting opportunity to Tim and I. And so that's what brought us to what we're doing now.
That's incredible. I had never heard that poker table story, that it was literally a joke concept that he had thrown out. And then the conversation with your mom, that was the connection point of, hey, this can go from being a joke or maybe some merit to it to like, no, this is actually a link towards preventive medicine.
Totally. So the big thing we realized, that the conversation with my mom was the first moment where we were like, wait, let's take this seriously. Let's actually do some homework And like, this was before Perplexity, right? Like, we did 6 weeks of homework that now you could do with 6 hours with Perplexity at the time, or now. But the homework we did was basically just trying to understand, right? Like, what can you learn? What biomarkers are in human waste, right? Like poop, urine, menstrual blood. What are the different conditions mapping onto those biomarkers? And there's a handful that are like huge, right? Like, you know, IBS, inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis is obviously, and then you have like benign prostatic hyperplasia is non-cancerous enlargement of the prostate that affects 50% of men in their 50s and 80% of men by age 70. IBS, by the way, is 10% of men and 20% of women. IBD is roughly 1% of the country. So these numbers, right? You talk about
staggering.
Like IBS, that's like anywhere between like 30 and 45 million Americans. IBD is roughly 3 million Americans. Benign prostatic hyperplasia is about 35 million Americans. Chronic kidney disease is another roughly 35 million Americans. You have recurrent kidney stone formers. That's like, I think the number was 2% of Americans are expected to pass a kidney stone in the next 12 months, and 12% of Americans will pass a kidney stone at some point in their lives. Like, one of the most painful things you can possibly experience. I watched a brother pass a kidney stone like 2 years ago, and he went to the hospital because they thought he was dying.
Yes, that's how painful it is.
Have you?
I've not.
Okay.
No.
When you said that with some authority.
No, one of my coworkers' wives just had one, and he said it was brutal watching her go through that.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
like my brother was like sweating, like
Yes.
like he thought he'd like ruptured his appendix rolling in jujitsu, and he was like, "This is the end for me."
Definitely.
Yeah,
It's wild. It's wild, man. It's I was doing some research before. It sounds like to your statistic, it's close to like 3 million Americans that I think have IBD. A much larger subset of that have IBS. I think IBD alone is like an estimated like $15 billion in direct healthcare expenditures outside of the indirect things like loss of wages for being in the hospital, these out-of-pocket treatments that you're paying for, these holistic modalities. And so before I'd ever met you and someone pitched the concept of Throne as essentially the Oura Ring or Whoop to your gut health.
Yeah.
And it's a toilet. It's a camera that literally goes in your toilet that integrates to an app. My immediate thought process was, if I had had this in college, I would have never gotten ulcerative colitis. What type of and so that link clicked for me immediately. And obviously, a lot of people that go through autoimmune or IBD, they view it in some ways kind of like a strange blessing in disguise because it forces you to go down these alternative modalities, which develop such great intuition. And that's where those people that are sending pictures to your mom, they don't have, like, these things that we're instinctually able to do, go to the bowel normally, eat regular foods, manage our weight that all other animals can do that we can't do. You know, we kind of have a sense that something is off, but we don't have that strong intuition that a lot of people that go down these alternative paths do have.
I don't know that it's that we can't do it. I just think it's that we don't do it.
We
right?
don't do it.
I think, because to your point, this stuff is highly intuitive, right? Like, I love talking about the history of like looking at poop because it goes back to like literally Hippocrates, right? The founder, the father of Western medicine, famously wrote, "All disease begins in the gut." And I don't think that's true, but spiritually, like, I appreciate where he's coming from. And like a lot of Hippocrates' writing was about like visual inspection of stool looking for diseases. And then in other cultures, right? Like Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine places heavy emphasis on like stool observation. Ayurveda places heavy emphasis on stool observation. It's like one of the key pillars of Ayurvedic medicine. And then like historically, like, it's off on a tangent here, but like this history is like so fun to me. So King Henry's the 7th and 8th in England had a member of the royal court named the Groom of the Stool, whose job was to inspect the king's poop and then liaise with the royal doctor about the king's health.
Wow.
Like,
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was actually a highly coveted like position in the royal court because you got a lot of one-on-one time with the king.
That's what's that? What was that role called? What was
the Groom of the Stool.
The Groom of the Stool.
Yeah, and then the kind of the modern equivalent of that's just so fun to me is Kim Jong-un infamously travels the world with his own toilet everywhere he goes if he's outside of North Korea because he does not want his waste to fall into enemy hands because there's health information in that. And, the supreme leader does not want, his health information to fall into the wrong hands, so to speak. And, North Korean defectors have confirmed this.
Yes.
And so when I think about what we're doing at Throne, it's we are trying to help shine a spotlight on those things that, used to be intuitive to us as a species that I think now, particularly in the West and particularly, in the, American, the America of the West, where we have these like kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Puritanical beliefs around, stool, right? Like people don't talk about poop in the United States like they do in other cultures, right? Like I've got friends from India who are like, oh yeah, like people talk about poop like casually. Mm-hmm. Like, you in Germany and, parts of Europe, the toilets are shaped differently to make it easier to look at.
Definitely.
Obviously, Asia, like, Korea and Japan, like, notorious for having the best toilets in the world. And like, it's just a much different culture around the conversation around poop.
Yes.
And so I think it's just not intuitive to us, but that doesn't mean it's not intuitive to us as a species. And so we're just trying to help in some ways make those conversations, A, more accessible, and then B, arm you with objective data to go have conversations with your healthcare providers and to be able to show you when something is not normal. Because a lot of people, if they're not talking about this with others, they don't know what normal looks like.
Definitely. That's why I wanted to share my story in the beginning to begin with, just because these things like ulcerative colitis, I'm publicly sharing with the world that I was shitting blood 30 times a day, right? People you don't want to say that out loud. That's why I think so many young men get it, is like you start having these flare-up symptoms. It's embarrassing. You don't bring it up. And then by the time you actually go to your doctor, you have full-blown UC with ulcers all over you. That was the example of me. And I've noticed so many of my friends that don't have like full-on IBD, they'll come to me because they're having irregularities, but they know that they have a safe space that they could talk to. So that just kind of like reinforces your point of we need to be talking about these things. And throughout history, we have talked about this, and we've just chosen to kind of brush it under the rug to our detriment. Because like you said, the gut health is so important. And it almost seems like our modern understanding at scale is like, we understand the gut equivalent to the way that we might understand space. Like there's so much more to learn and so much that we don't understand that we should.
Totally agree, right? Like this is one of the things that statement, we understand the gut like we do space. Completely accurate. Like there are like hundreds of millions of different microbes in your gut that have some effect on your gut. And I think the current state of, humans' scientific understanding of the role those microbes individually play in your gut is so nascent. And like there are like, 5 different biomarkers that I think we can objectively say, we understand well, right? So it's the inflammatory markers like calprotectin and lactoferrin, especially someone with UC, like that's the number one thing they look for when they take a stool sample in patients with IBD is particularly calprotectin. Then there are, a couple microbes like C. difficile or E. coli that, if you have an overgrowth of those, that's objectively a bad thing. And then with like, I'd say a lesser degree of certainty, we can say that, bugs like Akkermansia are good. But then beyond that, I think one of my gripes with a lot of the existing kind of microbiome testing tools, I've tried a couple of these microbiome tests where you submit a stool sample and send it off to a lab and then they send me back, your results. One is like we as humans, we love linear relationships, right? Like more of this is good, less of that is bad, or whatever it is. I don't think that's how the gut microbiome works, right? The gut microbiome is, outside of a handful of like known examples, is by and large a like multifactorial compensatory system where like just because you don't have like good microbes A, B, and C doesn't mean you're not compensating for that by having, some other combination of microbes, I, J, and K. And so at any rate, it's all the wild, wild west. And so the thing we're saying is we are not looking at your gut microbiome. People always ask, like, is this going to test my microbiome? And like, no, Throne is not looking at your microbiome. Throne is looking at your stool consistency, your stool frequency, presence of blood or mucus. And then we're also looking at like strain, like, how long you're sitting on the toilet and like the distribution of evacuation events. Like, and again, this is gross, but like, this is the conversation that we're trying to like help people have and just recognize like it's not gross, it's human. But like, if you sit there and you have a healthy bowel movement and then you sit on your phone for another 20 minutes, you're probably just like scrolling Reddit, Twitter, avoiding work. If you sit there and you have your first movement after 5 minutes and then your next one 7 minutes later, like that is probably a sign of severe strain and constipation or like partial evacuation. And it's like, that's data that no one has today. And like the GIs we talked to are stoked about getting this data.
Yeah. And I mean, my process was so manual, right? When I connected with Dane Johnson, who I know you've met before, amazing guy that runs Crohn's Colitis Lifestyle. He's probably one of the best, if not the best, holistic UC Crohn's healthcare coaches that actually exist and teaches you that preventative model and to develop intuition. He was the one that told me to actually keep a food journal and also a log of the amount of bowel movements that I was having in a notebook. And so I was really diligent with it, but I would definitely miss sometimes too. So just that simplicity of like having that device on the toilet so you don't even have to think about it and you actually have the most accurate data is super refreshing, and it encourages me to think about other people that might have IBS or IBD or might end up going on to develop it, what the positive ramifications could be. And I also love your approach around simplicity is actually better when it comes to gut health. And I think that's the direction that I hope we take in regards to health and wellness in general, because there's been such a almost like oversaturation of inputs within the last 2 years. And a lot of that comes from a really good place. But what I find is that the average person that's trying to just optimize these things and not overcomplicate, they don't really know where to start because they're getting so much opinionated nuance and someone saying this thing, the other person saying one thing, they don't even know how to get started.
Scott Hickle TikTok is chaos. Dude.
Is it?
Oh yeah.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. I mean, ask 10 different people for, gut health tips, you'll get 11 different tips, right?
Yes.
I did not realize though that you had done the paper stool log and food log. So that's like, I talk about that a lot in terms of how long do you do that for?
I did that for probably 6 months, I would say.
And what was your primary takeaway from doing that exercise?
I found that for me in particular, because I was still in somewhat of a mini flare-up stage, and I still get like this too. My worst flare-up was 2016. I've been off biologic drugs since 2022, and I've probably had 3 mini flare-ups where I was going to the bathroom like 8 to 10 times a day with some blood in the stool. I've had that like 3 times since 2016. Nothing super, super major, but almost all of my bowel movements would come in the morning, where it would be like almost every 20 to 30 minutes. And then I would taper off into the afternoon at night. And sometimes I wouldn't even go to the bathroom at all after like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I don't know what that means, but I started playing around with inputs where I was like, well, what if I stop eating earlier in the day, sleep? I was able to play around with those variables, but I'm immediately thinking how much easier this whole process would be.
So that's exactly right. What you're describing to me is you're running these experiments, right? And like, I'm such a believer, what gets measured gets managed.
Yes.
And like the fact that you were measuring it meant that you were able to like, okay, if I tweak this and keep track of that, like, now I have the objective data week over week, right? Did that small change like in my diet, in my, eating patterns, when I eat these foods, when I go to sleep, like, did that have an impact on my gut health? And like, you can go back and see the objective results, yes or no. Like, so that exercise that you went through is something we hear dietitians and nutritionists do with their clients all the time, and it's always on paper. And the big one they'll do it for is looking for dietary triggers, sensitivities, and intolerances, right? So like, and those are distinct from allergies, because allergies, are autoimmune in nature, whereas dietary triggers, sensitivities, and intolerances are more enzymatic, and so it's like stuff you can't test in your blood for. And it really is just like, did this react well in my gut? And, did I have a healthy bowel movement afterwards? Or did I, have what's called like a Bristol 5, 6, or 7, like looser liquid stool caused by this? And so that process of like having to write that stuff down, like incredibly painful. I mean, it just takes time. The other thing is like even people who have a chronic disease whose life would be like measurably improved by going through the exercise you did, a lot of people don't have the discipline to do that. They just don't.
100%.
And so that is a opportunity for us to improve with technology, because right, like, look, and the other thing is people are looking for these sensitivities and intolerances just manually eyeballing, right? Like, okay, well, you wrote down that you ate, gluten at this hour, and like 6 hours later you had, loose stools. Like, maybe let's try cutting gluten. That's something that could obviously be improved with like basic linear regressions and, like tools, right? And so that's one of the things we're most excited about is we recognize that like we don't, from a gut health perspective, we don't care what you ate if you have a healthy gut, right? Like, now, obviously if you're trying to lose weight and track calories or, you know, like gain weight and your macros matter, but like if you're just looking to optimize your gut health, the thing that matters is the food that caused a trigger or like a, you know, a partial flare, and, you know, led to an unhealthy bowel movement. And we recognize like we have a captive audience when you're on the toilet.
Yes.
And you're having that, you know, loose or liquid stool. We can send you a push notification and be like, hey, you know, looks like you're having a bad time. What'd you eat in the last 18 hours?
Yeah.
And just log all the things you ate. Just describe it to us, right? AI is so magical now for food tracking. Like I used to count my calories when I was in college with MyFitnessPal, and it was miserable.
It's so miserable.
It sucks. Now, I did it last year for 3 months. I logged every calorie I ate for 3 months using levels. And it's so much easier now because you just describe, you know, I just had whatever, like, you know, 2 pancakes and a latte, whatever it is, right? But and then boom, like done in 2 seconds instead of like 2 minutes of searching through bullshit. Point is, like, we have a captive audience when you're on the toilet, you're there with your phone, we know you're having a bad time. We can ask you, hey, what did you do that might have led to this? You're highly motivated to like get that down. And then we can start building up that data set and say, okay, it looks like 80% of the time when you have, you know, a loose or liquid stool, it's because you drank caffeine in the previous 6 hours or, you know, ate ginseng or whatever the ingredient is, right? But like we can start to give you a really data-driven triangulation on how your gut responds to different ingredients. That like outside of having the discipline to do this paper journal, like no one has. And also no one's going through that paper journal more than 90 days at a time, right? Like you're looking at like a week at a time max just because that's the most context you can keep in your head. Whereas like when we have data, we can give you like, okay, here's what your gut has responded to over the last 90 days, 180 days, last year. Like I'm so excited for that feature.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for it too. It just takes any of these like variables or it removes the friction. It takes all of that stuff off the table. Like I can't wait until, you know, you're getting patients that might have like early onset IBD, maybe it's IBS, but they have that internal drive to buy a throne to potentially prevent it. And they're able to take that data and incorporate the right changes. And then they don't end up having IBD or, you know, guys that have had, you know, colitis or Crohn's for years that ends up metastasizing into colon cancer. Like so much of colon cancer, like you've taught me, is it's preventable in the early stages. And it's like things like throne that are going to prevent that.
So I don't want to make the claim that we'll prevent anything, right? Like we are very much not a medical device. We're a health and wellness device. But I will say the mission of the company, longer term, right? We're not there today, but like the colon cancer thing, glad you brought that up. Like, so kind of the morphology of colon cancer is that it typically starts as what's called like a carcinoma. It's a little polyp, you know, in your colon that grows and grows and grows. And that polyp becomes a malignant tumor anywhere between, on average, like 10 to 15 years later. And so it means you have a long time to find it, right? And if you get a colonoscopy in that 10 to 15 years, in that window, and the colonoscopist or gastroenterologist finds that polyp, they can just like lasso it out and like, boom, like, you know, no more cancer risk. Like, you know, they'll tell you come back for another colonoscopy at that point for a screening colonoscopy. You know, they might up your cadence of getting colonoscopies, but you're pretty safe. The real risk is that, you know, it goes that 10 to 15 years undetected and then, you know, transforms into a malignant tumor that then grows much more aggressively. And the thing that I'm most excited about, you know, the 5-year vision for the company, the mission that I'm on is I want to build the smoke detector for colon cancer because I want to look for trace amounts of fecal occult blood. That's blood that's in the stool that's invisible to the naked eye. But it gets there because as stool goes through the colon and brushes past that polyp, it rubs it raw. And that polyp will start, you know, like a little scrape on your arm, right? That'll just like little tiny amounts of blood end up in the stool. And if we can use, you know, advanced sensing technologies to detect those trace amounts of fecal occult blood with high sensitivity and specificity, we don't need to say you have colon cancer, right? Like there's a lot of things that can cause blood in your stool, from, you know, ulcers to, you know, fissures and fistulas and hemorrhoids. The scariest is colon cancer. And all we need to say is, hey, you have a pattern of like blood in your stool. You should go show this to a doctor. And any doctor who sees a pattern of blood in your stool, like will either ask you to take a Cologuard test. And so, I see us as like the first line of defense. Then you take, this Cologuard test, which is actually looking at like, the DNA in your stool, or they'll just send you straight into a colonoscopy. And like, if we save one life who otherwise would not have gotten a colonoscopy, they can say in good faith, my toilet saved my life. Game over. Like, that is the reason I was put on this planet.
Yes.
Like, I am so pumped for that moment.
I mean, what better motivation do you need as a founder? Like that goal, man, picking a mission that's that important.
It's so meaningful. And the thing is, like, now since I've made this my mission, I've met dozens of people who lost their parents to colon cancer too young an age, lost siblings who themselves had colon cancer. Like, the stories we hear, the other part of this also that's like crazy to me is the importance of the color blindness. Like, I think it's like roughly 12% of men are colorblind.
Interesting.
It's either 8% or 12%. It's like a shockingly large percent of male population is colorblind. And the most common form of colorblindness is the inability to distinguish between red and green, but like tangential to that, it's harder to detect blood, reds and browns.
Oh, wow.
And so twice now I've heard stories. One guy had a form of ulcerative colitis called pancolitis, which is like the most severe form. So, typically ulcerative colitis is restricted to the 8 to 10 centimeters of the colon just above the rectum. Pancolitis is like the whole colon's on fire. The ascending, transverse, and descending colon. And he didn't discover that he had ulcerative colitis until he had gone poop one night, didn't flush because he didn't want to wake up his wife. And his wife woke up the next morning and was like, holy shit, like, this is a war zone. What's going on? He's like, I looked in the toilet bowl. I could not see what she's seeing. It was just blood.
Wow.
Yeah. He just thought he'd had diarrhea, like, bad food. Same thing. Another guy reached out and told me, identical story, right? Like, didn't flush, didn't want to wake up his wife. And he was 29 years old. Like, and he was like, look, like, my wife, same thing, woke up the next morning, found this. And I went to the doctor, and turns out I'd had stage 3 colon cancer, and I got it removed surgically, and like, now I'm in remission, I'm good. But like, if I was not married, I'd be dead.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. I did not know that high of a percentage of men are colorblind and can't differentiate between the reds and the browns.
Yeah. So like, for that stuff, like the visible blood, we don't even need like advanced sensing technology. Just a straight up camera can do that.
Yes.
And like, that's amazing to me.
Yeah, there's almost different layers to what you just said, where it's like there's the color blindness thing, and then it almost highlights a bigger picture issue, which we've been talking about, which is like, either way, if you have a pattern of going to the bathroom like that, whether you can see the color or not in your stool, that's how your stool looks. There's some other levers that we need to be pulling here. There's levers you're pulling that are not right, because that should not be how you're going to the bathroom.
Totally. I mean, this came up. I was on a bachelor party for my sister's fiance a few weeks ago. And he's a few years younger than me, in law school. All his buddies are, 24, 25, like either, in their graduate degrees or, first job out of school. And they were all in a frat together. And like, they found out I was working on Throne. And like, as you can imagine, that's a very popular topic of conversation with like a big group of frat boys. But like, one of the things they talked about is like, oh man, like, I'll be shitting liquid, like, at least 3-4 times a week. Like, that's like just base case their reality. And like, again, it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Like, people don't know what normal is. Like, to be able to show them like, hey, that frequency of this consistency is like objectively unhealthy. Like, that's a dietary problem. But like, if you're living your life like that, right, and it's just you're eating ultra processed foods, which most of us are most of the time, like 60% of American calories are ultra processed. And so that diet leading to a highly dysregulated gastrointestinal system, which you become desensitized to, right? It's the frog in the boiling pot of water. Like, shit, dude. Like, I ate 4 Eggo waffles drowned in Aunt Jemima's maple syrup every morning for the first 18 years of my life. And both my parents are doctors.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's pervasive. Like, my point is, like, if that's what your normal is and you're colorblind, it's a perfect storm.
The perfect storm. And there's a lot of people that fall into that camp.
Yeah.
So it's very similar. What you guys are doing is very similar to, why you're wearing a Whoop and why I'm wearing an Apple Watch. It's like I wear these things because I like to, this watch forces me to actually develop intuition through the data. And I think if you're living your life where, you need a Whoop 24/7 or an Oura Ring and your sleep score sucks and that throws your entire day off, like not being that crazy and religious with it, but like using these things for a purpose to develop that intuition. And I would imagine the goal of Throne is to get to a point where these users are saying, okay, I ate this and did this yesterday. My bowel movement is not normal. Now let me course correct and learn how to do that on their own.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like the kind of the downside case that you're describing, the people that are obsessed with it. There's a term, orthosomnia, in sleep, right? Which is like you're so obsessed with your sleep score, the quality of your sleep, that it actually sabotages your ability to sleep. And like that principle is exactly what we want to avoid.
Definitely.
Like we do not want people to be obsessing with their hydration or gut health score to the point where it actually undermines their health. We just want to give people a window into their body that they otherwise would not have. And so, and again, just give people the opportunity to run those experiments like you ran on yourself to find what works for you, because everyone's body works so differently.
Definitely. That's why I love what you said too about, you're essentially like, if your bowel movements are good, I don't care what you're eating.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that, I don't want to say we've changed, but maybe just evolved over time, where carnivore worked really well for me. And there's also a lot of other modalities that have worked for a lot of people too. Like this rigidity around food groups and people that are eating meat and fruit fighting with meat-based people and Mediterranean diets people. Like there's so many people that have had success on those things. And I love what you just said, where it's figure out the combination of those things that works the best for you. And then we have the data to actually calibrate whether it's working or not.
Totally. So the kind of the feature we were just talking about, right, where you're running these N-of-1 experiments, the one step ahead of that I want to build, and again, this is not launching in 2025, but like once we have, thousands of users using Throne, tracking the things that are working for them, then what I'm most excited about is we're able to say, okay, for other people who look like you, who had a similar diet and digestive pattern, what are the interventions that actually work for them, right? Like, was it adding probiotics? Was it adding magnesium before bed? Was it cutting certain foods? Like, whatever those things are, like, we're impartial, but like, because so many people's gut health journey is just throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks. And they get discouraged if they try 5 or 6 things and nothing works for them. And I think we'll have really meaningful data to be able to say, okay, like based on your personal digestive system and your patterns, here's what we think will work for you based on other people who had similar patterns. And let's, we have 80% confidence in this and 70% confidence in this. And then let's just stack rank order those for you. And like, you run down the list and run these experiments one at a time. And, best case scenario is we find something that works for you and like you found relief and like these changes in your diet and lifestyle meaningfully improves your quality of life. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario is you've tried things that didn't work for you and you're no worse off than you were before. And now you know 5 things that didn't work.
Wow. Dude, that's unbelievable to think about. Like, even if I was using it, I remember when I was in the middle of a mini flare-up, I had one of my buddies who's a doctor in New Jersey, Dr. Curtin Perek, who's been on the podcast. He has Crohn's and just has a supplement and regimen for everything. So when I was in the mini flare, he was like, you have to get on oral BPC 157, and then you need to take this herb called Qing Dai, which I had never heard of before. Literally it was like 4 to 5 days of taking those things, all of the blood in my stool went away. And so again, I would imagine if you had that data and were able to recommend some of those modalities to people.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, right? Like you were lucky to have a friend
100%
who, again, like has IBD.
Yes.
You have IBD, right? Like similar diet and digestive patterns. And they were able to make that recommendation for you. A lot of people, you have the gift of talking about your disease openly. A lot of people don't have that.
No.
And so, thank you for sharing. I love that
Definitely,
story.
Man.
Also, one thing I wanted to ask you about, going back to the kind of the journey of your disease, you mentioned, you found yourself, how old were you?
I was 20. I just turned 21. So it was going into my senior year when I got diagnosed.
How long from onset of symptoms to diagnosis, what did that path look like and how long did that take for you?
It's a good question. I would say, it's such an interesting question. So it was the summer when I got diagnosed with full-blown UC. That was the summer of 2016. So I got diagnosed in August. And then the previous fall, before I had transferred to Babson, I was at a different school called Seton Hall. That was when the fall of 2015 is when I first started having blood in my stool. I probably had it for a couple months and then pushed it off to where eventually I forget who I told, and they were like, you have to find a doctor now. And then I got diagnosed with, I think it was proctitis. And then I just took like some suppositories for that. It went away on its own. And then I was interning in New York City at AIG. And then I noticed in early June, the train rides were getting more uncomfortable because I was having to use the bathroom. And then, so it was like, it started early, went away, and then came back that summer. And then by the end of the summer, it was like 20 to 30 times a day.
Wow. And going back, so fall 2015, you have the first onset of symptoms and at Seton
Hall, yeah.
And how long was it from that to your first conversation with the doctor that diagnosed you with proctitis?
That's a great question. It was probably 2 months, I would say.
Yeah. That's exactly the type of thing that, like,
yes.
I would love. Again, we don't want to be making diagnoses, but we do just want to be able to throw up a red flag and say, hey, this is abnormal. Let's get you into a proper, medical consult sooner rather than later. This is something that, Peter Attia talks a lot about with the healthcare 3.0
Definitely.
model is, we wait as Americans until we are symptomatic. And by the time you're symptomatic, it's often too late to meaningfully change course.
100%. Yeah, like now I have the measures in place where obviously if I notice any blood in my stool, my alarm bells are off. And that's when I have my resources where I'm like, all right, I will go back to a pure red meat, bone broth, and water diet. I'll cut these things out. I'll sleep really well. I'm going to work really hard to minimize stress. Like I have those guardrails that I can kind of put in place. And then if that doesn't work, I'm like, okay, if this is still going on after 2 weeks, then that's when I'll, seek out a GI or something like that. But again, it's like why I got sick in the first place is my alarm bells weren't going off, which is so crazy. It's like, dude, you have blood in your stool. Go get that checked out if it's persisting over a long period of time.
I mean, this is, the old joke is like guys will wait until the rectum falls out.
No, literally. Yeah. That's so exciting, man. I know too, a cool story for you is obviously we were texting this whole time. I know you had this incredibly like just intense period of fundraising that was super successful. And the cool thing about that was you were using Throne, right, during the fundraising process.
Yes.
And so like what made me think of it was I know for myself, typically whenever I get a mini flare up, it's a high period of stress as well. And when I got sick, I was extremely stressed out. And so it was interesting for you to tell me off record just your mindset fundraising and what that was doing to your gut health versus when the raise was closed. And I'd love for you to talk about that.
Absolutely. So, okay. Two things here. The first is I had to, part ways with somebody on our team last May. That was so deeply stressful, right? Like it's like one of the worst parts of the entrepreneurial journey is those moments. And that day, my baseline is like generally incredibly healthy gut. I'm just blessed to have, trained in Japan. And that day I woke up constipated, had a healthy bowel movement, and then shit liquid at the end of the day. And like that's a full, like across the full spectrum. Like that's never happened to me. And like that was just my body's response to stress. And it was like crazy to me to like see like, I was wearing the Oura ring, and the Oura is like, you spent 5 hours in the most stressful zone that you could possibly spend on the daytime stress graph. At the same time, I had this like, Throne data showing me like, wow, like my gut is really out of whack right now. And so that was my first time seeing the overlay of my gut health and my stress and making that connection in that way. And then I started fundraising in October and closed around Christmas Eve. And if you go back and look at my, what we call digestive pattern, which is just like a graph of hard, healthy, loose, and liquid bowel movements, like I went from just like straight healthy to just like healthy, constipated, liquid, constipated, healthy, constipated. And like, skip days and like, that was like, it's just wild. And then as soon as I closed the round, I got super sick, right? Like the body keeps score. And like my central nervous system was like, like deep sigh of relief. We got through this. Now we're going to, shut down and it's time for you to get really sick for 2 weeks. And then once I recovered from that, back to normal. And it's just like, and like, it's so fun to like use my own product and go and learn these things about my own physiology, right? Like, we talk a lot about the mind-gut axis. And like, for me, I know without a shadow of a doubt that the arrow from my mind to my gut is way bigger than my gut to my mind, right? Like, when I'm not feeling great, I'm not depressed, but when I'm stressed, my gut is in knots.
Mm-hmm. And you did another experiment too. We weren't quite as close at this time. We had met before and had gotten that coffee, but seeing you from afar do a 30-day challenge of pure ultra processed food, I was like, I can't wait to see what this looks like. It's almost like you did your own version of Supersize Me. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that? 'Cause that was fascinating.
So that was inspired exactly by what we were just talking about with the mind-gut axis. I was curious, right? Like, if I do a 30-day challenge to intentionally throw my gut out of whack, what will that do to my mind? And so the way I structured the experiment was it was inspired somewhat by Supersize Me, but instead of just eating, infinite junk food, it was what happens if I eat the same amount of food, right? Like 3,000 calories a day, continue to exercise, continue to sleep 7 hours a night, but just change the nutritional value of my meals alone, right? So instead of eating, like, my typical day is eggs, salmon, Greek yogurt, like healthy stuff. If I switched from the normal healthy whole foods to only ultra processed foods, 100% of my calories for 30 days, what would happen to my body and my mental physiological state? And the results were wild. So I tracked, obviously I wore my Whoop, I wore an Oura Ring, I used Throne, I did DEXA scans before and after, I did blood work through Function before and after, I did microbiome tests through Tiny Health before and after, looking not only at the microbiome but also inflammatory markers. I weighed myself every single morning and every single evening, 4 times a day. I would check, just self-report my mood, energy, focus, and stress. It was an hour of data collection every single day, on top of shooting a little selfie video, describing what I'd eaten that day and how I was feeling. It was an undertaking. And the biggest lessons were, number one, I went from having no inflammatory markers in my gut to having inflammatory markers in my gut. My bowel movements only changed when I ate really crazy stuff. So one day I ate Krispy Kreme donuts for 3,000 calories and just shit liquid for 2 days. Yeah. The other one was spicy food day, which is the closest I've ever come to shitting myself. There's this concept called urgency, right? Which is how exactly what you're describing, feeling on the trains, right? Where it's this is getting in the way of my ability to live my day-to-day life. I was on one of those walks that I love going on and just stopped my buddy. I was like, dude, I've got about 100 yards in me. And fortunately, was able to find a hotel, but
thank God.
Yeah. Oh, this just, wild how just changing my diet, it just went through me like that. The other big learnings, this is the most crazy to me, was eating ultra processed food for 30 days, dropped my testosterone 30%.
Wow. My
free T dropped 25%. My total T dropped 30%. I went from having 0.2 pounds of visceral adipose tissue, which is the unhealthy fat that lives in your gut, went from 0.2 pounds to 1.12 pounds, so a 5.5x increase over 30 days, despite the fact that I'd lost fat on net. I weighed slightly less at the end of the 30 days than I did going into it, but all my fat just left my extremities and went into my gut. The craziest results. So,
what was your mood like?
That was the other one that took a big hit. So my mood and my energy in particular took a huge hit. My mood took a hit. And my stress was kind of up and down, but that's just startup life. The most interesting one was I had a colleague sitting across from my desk from me who secretly kept a journal of her read on my mood. And at first, the first few entries, he's chipper, he's great, sunshine and rainbows. By the end, she's he came in the room radiating bad energy, he is hating life right now. And that's especially bad because one of the things I recognize is leading a startup, trying to make a new thing in the world. If you show up with negative energy too many days in a row, game over.
I don't think sorry, go.
After you.
All I was going to say was we don't put nearly enough emphasis on as a founder, like your energy output, how important that actually is.
100%. People want to work, or people have to want to work with you.
Yes.
Right? Like if I'm a like impatient, short fuse, like temper tantrum prick, like that's going to kill me and the company.
Yes. So there's the decrease in testosterone, the increases in adipose tissue, and then there are these other things that are equally, if not potentially more important, like your overall energy. That's a result of all those things. And I love the fact that you kept all the other variables the same, except for just the foods that you were eating. So like it was about as true of as an experiment you could get. Probably the only way you could get it better is if you're able to do it when you using a throne, which would be awesome to see.
I did use.
Oh, you actually did use a throne. Okay,
and
cool.
then the other thing I also didn't mention was a continuous glucose monitor through levels, and that was also crazy to see because like my A1C hardly changed at all. But so the big learning there was like there's value in continuous monitoring because
Yes.
the A1C is just looking at the average of your past 90 days like glucose, whereas like using the CGM and seeing the spikes in my glucose minute by minute, I learned like my mood was at its best when my glucose was spiking, and at its worst when it was falling. It wasn't the level that mattered, it was the rate of change.
Yes.
And when my glucose is spiking, I feel invincible, and when my glucose is crashing, I am like just intrusive thoughts like how many times can I roll my car at 90 miles an hour?
100%. I would imagine that there are certain people would see that experiment and immediately just try and justify it and be like, dude, of course, those things are going to happen. You're eating 100% of ultra processed foods. But then the statistics are that 63% of all calories consumed in the US are in the form of ultra processed foods. So that means that the average American, over half their meals is coming from ultra processed foods, which means there's people that are probably eating almost all of their calories from ultra processed foods.
Absolutely.
So it matters.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the reality is like, they're foods, right? Like they're intended to be eaten.
Yes.
Like, and to your point, like there are people who subsist exclusively on these things, or the majority of their diet is these things. They don't realize because, again, frog in the boiling pot of water, right? Like if you don't have a healthy baseline, you don't know what normal is. And so, you're used to eating Oreos for dinner. And like, yes, it's calories, right? Like it's fuel. You're able to live, but it's certainly not your best life.
Yes. That's why I love what you guys are, your ethos at Throne, and what we're trying to do with our show and with Noble is this paradigm shift of, we're not saying that nutrition and health and wellness is your God. It's more of just this base layer so you can get to that energy management piece that we were talking about. Like if you're eating salmon and Greek yogurt and single ingredient real foods, and you still make space to enjoy life and have a beer and a pizza every once in a while, but you're consistently filling that baseline with the right things, you're just going to be shocked at the person that you can turn into. And that's what probably gets me the most sad, is just thinking about the unserved potential that exists in this country because of the incorrect inputs.
Totally. No one loves a sweet treat like I do.
The best.
Right? Like
yeah.
I love a sweet treat. It just tastes 10 times better when it's, 1% of my diet than when it's 100% of my diet, and you're just like mindlessly going through a sleeve of Oreos.
Yes.
Right? Like, again, like to your point, like nutrition should not be your God. It should just be the foundation of a healthy life pyramid. But like, I'm very much like a food is fuel kind of guy, right?
Yes.
Like I don't need every meal to like, again, this is the thing, like I think we're so spoiled in modern society we have the option for every meal to be like a genuine delicacy, right?
Literally hit every flavor sensation that you want.
And for cheap, and like that's the dark side of ultra processed foods, is they're so compelling. But like if you just eat to get by and then like, save your appetite and your money for like, meaningful meals out with friends, or like, cooking with your girlfriend, like it just makes those meals that much more special. And then like, one sweet treat hits different.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That ice cream, when you've really earned it too, there's nothing better than I would say working hard. When you get flowing on this stuff, it doesn't even feel like it's working hard, but when you feel like you really deserve that, it's the best. Like anything in life, that contrast is what creates the experience.
Absolutely.
Man,
I love that.
Yeah, that's what was the spicy food day the hardest?
Spicy food day, because I'm also like, I don't love spicy foods that much. You know, my mom's Canadian, like that's like, you know, diet British food basically. Not known for being spicy, but yeah, spicy food day was just by far the least pleasant, and followed closely by gas station food day.
Oh my gosh, dude!
Yeah,
gas station food day.
The most dangerous actually was goo day, like, you know, the goo running gels.
Yes.
So I set out to eat only goos for a day, and then I had my first and only like hypoglycemic moment in my life where I was driving and just like lost awareness of where I was, and I pulled over into a parking lot thinking I was pulling over into a different parking lot. Like, I've been in Austin 15 years. I know exactly where I'm at pretty much at all times. Like, I looked up, I was like, holy shit, I am not where I thought I was at all. I'm gonna go eat some real food now. And, you know, not real food, not like, you know,
But
something
that's not a gel.
more substantial, yes, than just gel. It turns out they don't even have nutrition facts on them because they're not food, that's a supplement. That was scary for a moment, right? Like, and like I've had a friend who is a type 1 diabetic, like, lose his license or have his license suspended because he had a hypoglycemic moment driving and like hit a, like, you know, immobile object.
Yes.
And like that, having flashbacks to that friend from high school in that moment, I was like, all right, that was too close for comfort.
Definitely.
Will not be playing with that one again.
Yeah, and those gels, man, I mean, they, in the endurance community, they hand them out at races like they're candy. And some people, it works well. They always rip my gut open. And I think that's going to be the next thing that we see in the endurance space is these better for you gels. Like, there's a company, Honey Plus, one of their founders is in Austin. It's in a gel pack, but it's just this really premium raw honey with, I think there's a caffeinated version. So there's caffeine in one of the two SKUs, and then a really good electrolyte profile and maybe adaptogens. But I think that's what we're going to see in the endurance space too, because those things will make you explode.
Yeah, I mean, I did not realize until relatively recently that runners and chronic digestive issues just like hand in glove. Like, that's like a very well-known phenomenon within the endurance running community. Is like,
Yes.
If you haven't shit your pants running a marathon, like, you're not a real runner.
100%.
I did not realize that was a thing.
Man, what's so crazy is, you know, Mark Sisson from Primal Kitchen. So he basically like is one of the OGs of the paleo community, but he was a ultra competitive marathoner when he was younger. He was like a 2:15 or 2:10 marathoner back in the day, like really fast. And he had really bad IBS from his inputs that he was as a runner. So it's like you're fueling for performance and you're driving towards that goal, but that doesn't necessarily mean just because you can run a 2:15 marathon, you're actually healthy.
Yes.
That's what's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's spiking so high in one area of health often comes at the detriment of other areas.
Oh, 100%. Before we wrap, brother, what would you say, what about Throne excites you the most? So kind of like the thought or the vision that pulls you forward when you're having an off day or something goes wrong in the business or anxiety or whatever is overwhelming you. What is that thing that excites you the most? And then what is like the most realistic, what is the hardest thing about what you're doing right now too?
Great questions. Okay, so the most exciting thing to me is building a product, a physical product in the real world that is going to help people. Like, that is, it's also like crazy that this opportunity exists, right? Like, I don't know. I think we talked about it this last time, but it really does feel like, you know, the universe has given me the opportunity to be the shepherd for this idea that is just like way bigger than me. And it is so special. Like, because I get to talk to people like you who like open up about the most intimate details of their personal lives. And yes, we're talking about poop, but like the nature of it is like, you can't not smile talking about poop, right? Like it's yes, it's like a very serious health product and this, you know, medical concerns. At the same time, it's so deeply human and so intrinsically there's just like levity baked into it. And like, what a special thing.
Yes.
You know, like to be able to build something that like I think will meaningfully help improve people's health and one day save lives. To your point earlier, right? Like, what more could I ask for? So that's by far like the thing that keeps me going. Is like every day I use this like 5-minute journal. This is like 3 things you're grateful for, you know, 3 things you want to get done today. And then like, you know, a mantra, and like every day I wrote like Throne improves health and saves lives. Like, that's going to happen. So that's what keeps it going. And then what was the second question?
Just what is the hardest thing about what you're doing right now?
The hardest thing about what we're doing right now is like making sure we're building the right thing, right? Like there's so many kind of like sharp corners you can catch yourself on building in this space, right? Like when we start out, it was like, are we going to build a whole toilet? Are we going to build like a toilet seat? Well, if you build a whole toilet, now you've restricted yourself to basically like new builds and renovations, right? Because like people have to install like grouting and stuff, and like, okay, well, if you build it into a toilet seat, like now you have to like do a whole install process for that, and like people can't use it with their fancy bidets, and if people have a Tushy or a Toto, like they're no longer in the market for it, because like even if you have a bidet on par with theirs, they're not going to upgrade, right? Like theirs is already, they spent hundreds of dollars on a really nice bidet with like a heated seat and stuff. So like, we had to make something that was like, an ancillary device that could be compatible with those. Like that, there's just so many of these like little human factors things that like, we think we've gotten most of them right. But like, we distribute these betas like the device you have, and I get on phone calls and Zoom chats with like every single one of our beta users and ask them like, what do you love? But more importantly, what do you hate? Like what if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about this app or this device, like what would that be for you? And we're the biggest one that we've learned from the beta is like making it hands-free, because right, the version of the device you have to push a button, and that is like fine for a beta device, but people aren't going to learn new bathroom habits, right? Like you've been doing the same thing your whole life, and introducing a new button to press, even though it's not a huge ask, it's still asking too much.
Yes.
And so like we know that the version of device that we go to market with for mass production has to be totally hands-free. So you just walk up to the toilet and it just magically knows, hey, this is Scott, or hey, this is Brett, turns on, and then turns itself back off when you walk away. And like that took us 4 months to figure out. And like we just got that prototype working last week, and it's like I'm so hype on that, but like it's hard. That it was a full team effort involving front-end engineers, back-end engineers, firmware engineers, mechanical engineers. Like there's a shocking amount of complexity that like we're just motivated to figure out. Going back to the point, the mission's big enough, and like this product is only as worthwhile as people want to use it.
I think that's the only true like real productivity hack that exists. Is I don't know, I could be wrong, but for me it's just the most confident I've ever felt in the way that I work is when I'm fully bought in on that mission, and it's so big and it's so audacious and there's a lot riding on it, and that's the thing that just pulls me to do all the things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Like these other things are helpful for sure. Like there's so much good stuff in Atomic Habits or whatever, but that's just the one thing that I always go back to, where it's like, hey, I have to do these things that I don't want to do, and then I immediately just anchor myself to that thing that you wrote down in the 5-minute journal, and that's what pulls me to do that stuff.
100%.
Yeah. I have one more question. So as you're speaking, it was making me think about your perspective. I think is super valuable to young founders or aspiring founders that listen to this show, where you had a super successful launch. The product's in beta right now. You guys aren't going to launch for a few more months, and you're just in the grind. You founded multiple businesses before. What is your honest perspective on work-life balance, fitting all the things in, time management?
It's a great question. I think I have great work-life balance. My girlfriend does not think I have great work-life balance, right? Like left to my own devices. Like I called her last night, and like I was at HEB getting supplies for dinner at like 10:15. She was like, babe, like that's crazy. I'm like, not really, like left to my own devices, I will be out of the house by 8 in the morning, and I won't come back until like 10 or 11, and like rinse, wash, repeat. And like, I'm just at home to sleep. And like, I love that, right? Like it's just, I don't consider that out of balance. That's just the balance that feels natural to me. But I also try my very best not to work on the weekends. Like I recognize like Throne is a marathon, not a sprint. I'm going to be doing this for the next decade of my life, at least, God willing. And weekends are for friends and family, right? Like I've got a lot of family in Austin. I've got, I've been here 15 years. I'm blessed to have like friendships over the last decade, like great friend groups. And I try and reserve those weekends for those things. And then evenings, weekdays is either I'm working late or I'm, spending time with my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think work-life balance is a deeply personal thing, right? And like what works for me won't work for other people. What works for other people definitely wouldn't work for me. And like I lose no sleep over that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's similar to nutrition in a lot of ways, right? There's different variables for everyone, combinations that work for certain people.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that what works for me changes from time to time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there are some times where, like you're pushing and you've got deadlines to hit and you're doing 12-hour nights or 12-hour days regularly and you're working through weekends despite, trying to keep that open. And then there are other times where it's like, I'm going to take off early on a Friday and go enjoy this perfect weather.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great point, man. Yeah, you can't be everything to everyone. And when I look at you, I get the sense that I think you're just so passionate and love building Throne so much that you're very content grinding during the week, and then at the same time on the weekends having that sacred time to fill the cup back up too, right? Like I have no doubt that there's a small percentage of founders where they're just like complete freaks and bulldogs and they just love working 24/7, and it seems like that works for them, but there's just a cost to all of this stuff too. And partially why I asked you that was I had this realization when I got back from Expo West. I just felt it was such an amazing trip. And then up to that point, I really haven't been sleeping great the last month. I haven't been getting outside and walking in the sun and just doing these very basic things that I typically do that make me feel whole. And this weekend, man, I did a little bit of work, but I just reserved it for working out, long walks with no phone, getting sunshine in, and I felt like a completely rejuvenated person. And that was my ticket for myself of like, you can keep working like this, but it's not sustainable, and you actually have to make time for this stuff if you want to keep doing what you're doing over time.
100% burnout is so real.
Yeah, it's so real. But I love that though. It's like just find the combination of the buckets that are the most important to you, fill those things up, and then also recognize that there are going to be time. Like I'm sure at fundraising mode, there are other buckets that you kind of have to say no to or put a pause on.
100%. I mean, this year for me is that bucket, right? Like I gave a speech at my birthday party last year, which is like a crazy thing to do, but it was very fun just because, you get to address 40, 50 of your best friends. Like how often do you get to do that? Once a year. And I, nominated last year the year of mojo, right? It was like getting my energy right. And like last year really was the year I fell in love with Throne. This year is the year of the dojo, right? Like saying no to a lot of things, like so I can be in the dojo studying the blade, right? Like we are grinding, we are building this year. This is the year where I'm, doing dinner at 10:15, like getting dinner supplies at 10:15.
Yes. And I think there's just a lot of peace that comes from just accepting the phases that you're in and then communicating that to your friends and your loved ones as well.
Totally. And like so many of the people in my life know what that entails, right? Like a lot of my friends are founders. Like a lot of my friends who aren't founders are like, that's just Scott. He's a crazy person. I'm like, great.
Yes. Yeah. And just there's truth there's freedom that comes from just admitting the truth of where you're at too. Like I have a really good friend from back home that moved to Austin a couple months ago. He had texted me because he was like, dude, he was my old roommate in New York. He's one of my best friends. And he reached out and was like, dude, I'm just surprised we haven't seen each other more. And he was totally fair in saying that. And then I just explained, I said, hey man, where I'm at is that I'm getting married in June. It's the most work that we've ever had. I don't mean this in a selfish way. It's more so I feel this very limited window of time where everything is clicking and my life is about to change so much. And with that being said, we still should get intentional time together too. So it was like but I just admitting where I'm at and just admitting the truth where it's like I want to keep building that friendship and relationship, but realistically, like this is my timeline right now, and I feel like I have this very small window that I'm not going to be able to get back, and I'll regret it if I don't.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I've got a few friends that I have like a monthly walk with, and if they cancel that walk, which probably happens like one or like half the time, if not 2/3 of the time, no sweat, right? Like I get it. Like, I'll see you when I see you, and I love you, and good luck with whatever dragons you're wrestling with right now.
Definitely. No, 100%, man. So what is the best place for people to get in contact with you, follow you, Throne? I know you guys are still in the pre-launch stage right now.
So you can follow us at Throne Science on X and Instagram. Our website's thronescience.com. You can get in touch with me. My Instagram and Twitter, X, whatever, just Scott Hickle. I love Twitter. That's the
best.
It's just so fun.
Yes.
And then my email, you can probably figure it out.
Awesome, man. Well, this is going to be such a big year for you too. As we said, we're going to have you back on for a part 2 as you guys get closer to that launch. But man, I've been wanting to do this conversation for a long time, and just your energy, your optimism, the persistence. It's like when I build friendships with people like you, it just pushes me to want to be better. And I think that's the amazing thing about us being here in Austin is just you're able to be surrounded by so many incredible people. And I think that's just a good source of encouragement for anyone. Like even if you're not in Austin, like just surrounding yourself with those people that give you the juices and you can go to with that problems that they might be experiencing as well. It's inspiring, man. And I know that you just want to juice the lemon out of life, and man, I'm just very bullish on you and honored to know you as a friend.
The feeling is 110% mutual, Brett. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, brother.